Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Orange Branch Historical Society. Our mission is to preserve the history of the Orange Branch and to advocate for turning the old railroad corridor into something meaningful. The reason we have presentations like the one today is because if we understand the importance of the Orange Branch, we'll be more inclined to preserve it. Rich Rockwell is a former Bloomfield councilman and author of the book Bloomfield Through Time. Welcome, Rich.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about the Orange Branch specifically in Bloomfield and specifically about the industries that it served. And we're going to take a tour of the Orange Branch from the east to the west. So we're going from Belleville to East Orange. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself. I've been interested in sort of abandoned transportation and urban exploring for a while. Um, my neighborhood is Halcyon Park, which is near the light rail. And I commuted on the light rail from Grove Street for many years. I've been involved with the Historical Society of Bloomfield for about 20 years. I'm the webmaster and I digitize and curate photos, mostly from negatives. And I'm on the board of the Canal Society. And I've worked on the Morris Canal Greenway projects in Bloomfield. And I'm going to be leading a walking tour of the Morris Canal and the Essex Hudson Greenway in I'm going to try to do them once a month throughout the summer. You can go to the HSOB Facebook page or the website for more information. We're in the process of scheduling the dates right now, so they haven't all been confirmed yet. But that's something that's coming up. Now, if you want to refer back to some of the things I'm referring to, two easy places to go back to for links is the Historical Society page is hsob.org, and I have a page, richrockwell.com. I'm going to talk about some documents. If there's a link on this page to some of the documents under um, Halcyon Park Historic District. There are some documents there about that I got a lot of information from that I'm using in this program about industries. When New Jersey Transit was planning to build the light rail in 1995, they were required to commission reports to do historical and archaeological surveys of the area within a quarter of a mile from the light rail. So that included everything from Newark into Bloomfield along the abandoned route of the Orange Branch. So they had a lot of details about industry, and a lot of the information that I am providing today was from there. So industry in Bloomfield, just in general, not specifically on the Orange Branch, in 1930s, Bloomfield had 68 industries, employed about 6,000 people. In 1937, Bloomfield manufactured products in excess of $53 million, which is close to a billion in 2026 dollars. And World War II, a lot going on the Orange Branch with industry in Bloomfield. During World War II, Bloomfield was rated among the top 10% in the eastern U.S. in production of war material, especially General Electric and Westinghouse. And in that period, Orange Branch became the busiest 4 mile section for originating freight on the Erie Railroad. In 1940, all the industries in Bloomfield got together and had an exhibit, an industrial exhibition, sort of like the little World's Fair of Bloomfield. They called it Know Your Town. So we've got a lot of photographs of all the industries that that had exhibits at that. I'm going to show some of those throughout the slides. These are a couple. Charms was an important industry in Bloomfield a lot of people know about, and on the right is Thomas Edison and his display for the batteries that he was creating in his factories. So war has always had an important impact on industry and freight as far back as the War of 1812. Copper from Belleville, there was a copper mill in Belleville, and that copper was used in warships, and they were shipped on the Greenwood Lake Railroad. And, the Orange Branch is a branch of the Greenwood Lake Railroad. So that was the original railroad as far back as the War of 1812. Civil War, Oaks Mill was making wool that was used in Civil War uniforms, and that was the time when the freight on the Morris Canal was at its peak. Then in World War I, international arms and fuse was a huge industry that grew up in Bloomfield along the Orange Branch. In World War II, they were making uranium at Westinghouse, and GM was making aircraft parts. And in that period, the Orange Branch became the busiest 4 mile section for originating freight on the Erie. So this is what we're going to look at here. I'm gonna got some color coding. So the green line on the top, hold on a second. The green line up here is the um, Greenwood Lake, Montclair Greenwood Lake line. That was now the abandoned rail line that is becoming the Essex Hudson Greenway. The orange line is the Orange Branch. This purple line here is the Lackawanna Railroad. That's the one that's still in use by New Jersey Transit. And the blue line is this line over here is the Morris Canal. So the Morris Canal actually intersected um, the orange line in one location over here in Newark. And so the section in blue here is the section between Forest Hills, where the Tiffany factory is in Newark, and the where the light rail. So that section of the Orange Branch was recently purchased by New Jersey Transit. The former Greenwood Lake line is now owned by the state, and they're turning it into the newest New Jersey's newest state park, the Essex Hudson Greenway. The section in the red rectangle here is the section that was used for the light rail. So that whole section there is taken up by the light rail. And we're looking at this section here that's just Bloomfield. But I'm including a little bit extra on both ends as it's related to getting into where we're talking about. So we're going to start in Belleville around the Silver Lake. This map has three of our important landmarks on it: Wendy's, McDonald's, and Burger King. So this is the section that's mostly light rail, but I'm going to talk about what that section was historically. Now, this is the location where the Morris Canal and the Orange Branch intersected. Um, that's in Newark. And so the Orange Branch came along here, and then in late and after 1995 was when they first started planning the light rail. They needed a place for their vehicle-based facility, and there was a piece of property available, and that's the one they chose, and that's near the Grove Street station. That also includes a station at Silver Lake. So that section that I was showing over here, where the Morris Canal intersected with the Orange Branch, these are some photographs that show the Morris. The top one is the Morris Canal, and there was a factory, a coal supply company in that location. So this is the bridge of the Orange Branch crossing the Morris Canal. And then in a later photographs, and as you can see, they're oriented towards using the Morris Canal for shipping. They've got this structure here that's used to load and unload coal from canal boats. And then a little bit later, the photo on the bottom, there's a new bridge in that location, and it looks like the coal company is now oriented towards the railroad instead of the canal. This is the Silver Lake Station on the Orange Branch, and this is almost the same location where the Silver Lake Station is today. So in the photo on the left, that's an aerial photograph that shows the Silver Lake Station. It was on the outbound side of the track, and it's about in this location where this vending machine is and today at the Silver Lake Station of the light rail. And you can see some of these buildings in the background are still there. So this is an aerial photograph that was commissioned by Thomas Edison. He had these aerial photographs taken of his property. So just to orient you, the Orange Branch is this line here. Silver Lake Station is over here. This is Belmont Avenue in Belleville. So all these buildings here were Thomas Edison's battery factories. There's nothing remaining of any of those. The only thing that's remaining is there's a little piece of fence on Belmont Avenue where the gate used to be to one of Edison's offices. And then you've got Franklin Street up here. All this property was purchased by Thomas Edison when he was buying property to expand his factories. So this is Franklin and Watsessing. This is where Stop and Shop is. The Stop and Shop shopping center is located today, and I live over here in Halcyon Park. So the fact that I'm close to the light rail and the Orange Branch is one of the reasons I'm more interested in it. So, and that was taken in 1928. So this is where I live in Halcyon Park. So this is giving you an example of sort of what was going on in the context around the time. So in 1895, a man named Cyrus Capron started this project, a development called Halcyon Park. He modeled it after Llewellyn Park, and the gatehouse that you see here is even similar to the gatehouse at Llewellyn Park, except it's a much, much smaller scale. But the quotes here are from a promotional brochure for Halcyon Park, and they were boasting that it's close to two railroads, one electric line, meaning the streetcar on Bloomfield Avenue. But they were promoting the fact that you've got the Erie Railroad is less than 2 minutes away, and you can walk from there, and it's also accessible. The Watsessing station, which was on the Lackawanna line, was also accessible. So the idea was it was going to be a homeowners association where everybody would pay into a homeowner's fee, and they would provide um, the landscaping. There was a greenhouse there. They would have a gatehouse, gardens, tennis courts. They had a clubhouse and stables. So when this development was first planned, people didn't have cars, and they would have had a common stable they could use where they would keep their horses. So the other piece of interesting history about this is when he planned all this in 1895, but due to a couple things. One was that there was a financial panic, and he was also having some issues with the way the ownership of property was the deeds to the property, and he ended up going bankrupt. So the property sat vacant for 10 or 15 years. And then in the 20s, when industry was taking off in Bloomfield and there was a huge demand for housing, Halcyon Park they started selling the lots at sheriff sale, and it was built out in the 20s during this housing boom that was also related to the industrial. So Thomas Edison had a lot of influence on the Orange Branch. In 1886, he started to build his factories in West Orange, and he convinced the railroad, Erie, that they should provide more freight on the Orange Branch. So the Orange Branch was originally conceived of as a passenger line, but it ended up being providing a lot of freight. So in 1888, that's when Edison bought up all 47 acres in Belleville and Bloomfield. 1889, he was experimenting with electric streetcars on the Torrey Corner branch of the Crosstown line in West Orange. 1889, he started a factory to produce batteries for railroad signal work. In 1910, Edison and Beach, a co-worker, one of his employees, who was a specialist in batteries, created a battery-powered train car that was test operated on the Orange Branch. And then in 1911, Ralph Beach, who helped design that battery-powered car, broke off and formed his own company that was also in the Edison complex of factories. And he continued to make batteries for train use. So this is the experimental car in 1911 that Edison was running on the Orange Branch. And this is from an employee magazine from 1911. They were talking about how this, the battery-powered car was working, and they're testing it on the Orange Branch. So this is Edison's display at the industrial exhibition. So he's showing some of the batteries, the types of batteries that they were creating in their factories. And this is one of the Edison buildings. This is the one on Belmont Avenue. So a piece of this fence is still existing. This is mostly a parking lot that's used by Lynn's auto dealership for Nissans. And over on this part of the property is where the path used to be a path mark. It's now called Superfresh. So that's on in Belleville. Now, moving a little bit west, we have another aerial photograph of the same area. We've got Belmont Avenue here. These are Edison's factories. The Orange Branch is the Orange Line. And this was International Arms and Fuse, this whole complex here. They had buildings on both sides of the railroad, and it was quite a large operation. And it was on Grove Street and Bloomfield Avenue. And here on Grove Street, you can see in this aerial photograph was this where the Bakelite factory was located. And this was 1928. Now there's an interesting little neighborhood thing going on here. This on off of Bloomfield Avenue, just right at the Belleville border, there are streets named Thomas, Alva, and Edison. Thomas Street was renamed to Columbus because Bloomfield already had a Thomas Street. But the people in this neighborhood were known for selling mostly grapes for winemaking and bananas. So they called the neighborhood Banana Alley. And at first I thought the railroad is really sort of up here on Bloomfield Avenue. How did they get the vegetables down to this area on Columbus? So there was a siding and a freight station right here on Bloomfield Avenue. So the siding lines and the freight depot were pretty close to Columbus Avenue. So the backs of the if you were to drive down Columbus Avenue today, look at the rear of the houses on that block, and most of them have large, what look like four or five car garages, which were originally warehouses that were used for warehouses for bananas and grape making. And I'm going to show you a little bit more about this freight station. So looking down Bloomfield Avenue. So this is the intersection on Bloomfield Avenue, and this was a very popular location to take pictures of trolleys. So people photographing the trolleys are actually incorporating photographs of the Orange Branch. You've got a little signal house over here. You've got your crossing signals. And this is looking down Bloomfield Avenue towards Newark, down it this way. But this building here is the freight depot. So this is the main Orange Branch line. They had a siding that went down here to the freight station. These three buildings are still standing today, but they've got different facades. The building here was demolished. That's where Wendy's is today. And this is what the freight station looked like. This is a photograph from one of Bill McKelvey's presentations. So this was on Bloomfield Avenue. This is across from Ampere Parkway. So this is about where there's a Walgreens and a auto parts store in this location today. So International Arms and Fuse, this is what the front of their building looked like on Grove Street. They started up in 1915 and originally were making these fuses for England. But when World War II started, they switched over to making them for the United States. But they had 25 acres and they were producing 20,000 fuses per day. And they weren't in operation very long. They were only in operation for about 4 years. And they sold the property to GM in 1919. So these are their buildings. This was from a period in 1938 when GM owned these buildings. So they're labeled plant number one, plant number two, plant number three, GM. And these two buildings were Charms. And there was a siding down here that went to the freight station, and there were sidings up here that went to various places within GM's buildings. So this was their office building on Grove Street. It was the Chevrolet division of General Motors that was in this location. So there was an article about General Motors in the Erie in 1955, the Erie magazine. So they had an article about the Chevrolet plant, the GM plant, and what they did there. So apparently they would receive parts for cars on the rail cars, and they would unload them, and they would take these parts and repackage them into large boxes and ship them overseas. So that they would fill these boxes with various parts for assembling automobiles. So they would have like these are some of the boxes that they were filling with auto parts. So they would assemble a set of auto parts that could be assembled into a certain number of vehicles. So they would have one of these boxes might hold all of the parts for 25 cars, and they would ship them on the train down to Weehawken, where they'd be loaded onto ships and sent out anywhere all over the world. That's pretty much how they handled the GM vehicles being sold in other countries. So Charms was one of the buildings in that complex. Um, they were well known for being in Bloomfield, and they moved out in 1973. So one of the buildings, the only building that's remaining from the International Arms and Fuse and GM era is the blue building you can see on the right over here. That was one of the original International Arms and Fuse buildings. And that's the only one that remains that's now used as a self-storage facility. So this is what the GM factory, the building looked like on the left here on the orange line before the light rail. And then this is where the light rail station is today, and the vehicle-based facility is over here on the left, where the GM building used to be. And as you can see, they still, when this photograph was taken, there was still a freight line that was in operation. They ceased the passenger service in the 50s, but continued providing freight until 2000. There's disagreement about the date, but it's sometime around 2007 to 2011. So this, I'm not sure what was going on here exactly, but this is all of the old PCC cars lined up at Grove Street, uh, probably when they were being removed and replaced with the light rail cars. They used to store all these PCC cars in the subway in Newark. Um, and so they switched them over to the new light rail cars, and they didn't have room for the new light rail cars in the subway. That's why they had to build the vehicle-based facility. I also wanted to point out that the when the Morris Canal was abandoned, they offered the property reverted to the state, and the state offered the property to the municipalities that it ran through. And Newark bought theirs. They bought their section of property, and so did Belleville and Bloomfield. But Newark used theirs to build the city subway. The city subway was built in the bed of the Morris Canal. And when they extended it to Grove Street, they used this section of this section of the Orange Branch. Um, so this now we're going to look at the section between Grove Street and Bloomfield Avenue. Not a very big section, but there was a lot that was going on here. So we have the Bakelite factory on Grove Street, right on the Orange Branch. This is the Orange Branch here. Um, they Bakelite had their own siding. You can see on this map there was a gatehouse here, and this is where the Bloomfield passenger station was. And it's this is called the map. This was 1906. So they were referring to Erie Railroad Watchung. They were referring to it as the Watchung Branch on the map. This is what the Bakelite factory looked like. They had 10 buildings on 2 acres and they employed 300 people. And in this photograph, the orange branch is in the foreground here on the left. Um, they had the words Bakelite on their smokestack and on their water tower. The 2 buildings in the foreground are the only ones that were remaining in recent times, and they were just demolished a couple years ago. So this is Grove Street here. So this is their exhibit at the Industrial Exhibition. They were showing what products were made from Bakelite. So one of the most common products made from Bakelite was the old black telephones. They also made resins that were used sort of like polyurethane. They made Bakelite was had a good insulative properties, so they used it for electrical insulation. This is a some kind of a light socket, so they used it in electrical parts. And this is the Bakelite buildings that were still remaining in Bloomfield as of a few years ago. When Bakelite moved out, they sold the building to Sharing, which had a presence in Bloomfield also. Their headquarters was over where Home Depot is today. Sharing, in turn, donated the property to Bloomfield College, and then Bloomfield College did a land swap with Bloomfield. So this became the DPW headquarters, Bloomfield's DPW. And it still is, a lot is still used by DPW. So for a long period of time, DPW used this building and they had shops in there and they were storing things in there. But at some point, they discovered that the building was seriously contaminated with asbestos, and they had to evacuate the building and not go back in. So the demolition started in 2024 and continued into 25, and um, there's nothing but a vacant lot left today. So this is one of the interior shots. I was in the building, had special permission to get into it before it was demolished. I wanted to see if there were any artifacts left from Bakelite or any equipment or anything that might have been relevant, including some stuff on the roof. They used to have these panels on the roof that they used to test the resins that they were creating. So at this time, this was mostly used for storage. So you're seeing traffic signals and those kind of things just stored in there. And a couple other photographs of the interior. They had these cabinets that were separately vented, which I assume were used by Sharing. I don't know whether they were originally used by Bakelite or not, but those are some of the things that were left in the building. And then they started the demolition in December of 2024. And this is what that property looks like today. It's part of the DPW property. Now, the section between Grove Street and Bloomfield Avenue is also owned by New Jersey Transit. Um, they are using this property now. It was open and people who live in the apartments up here walked through here to get to the light rail, but they have recently fenced it off and put gates with locks, and it's not accessible anymore. And it looks like they're using it for storage. They have both concrete ties and wooden ties that are being used there. This would be a great section that would make a great pedestrian walk. We need pedestrian crossings on Bloomfield Avenue for this location too. It's a convenient way to get to the light rail. So there was a Bloomfield station on the Orange Branch on this 1906 map. It's on the inbound side of the tracks. And this is a photo of it from Jim Costabos's book, Trackside Along the Erie Railroad and Its Connections. The Bloomfield station and the Silver Lake station were very, very simple. They were just shelters. They didn't have any ticket booths or anything, and they weren't uh, architecturally well designed the way some of the stations in towards West Orange were. And upper right-hand corner, that's pretty much what it looks like today. That's the section that's between Grove and Bloomfield Avenue. It's just gravel and fenced in now. The other side of this fence is Wendy's parking lot. Now we're going to look at the Bloomfield Avenue to East Orange section. So this is taking us to the western end of Bloomfield, the western end of where the Orange Branch is in Bloomfield. The Orange Branch is the orange line. Purple line is the Lackawanna. So the Lackawanna and the Orange Branch had an intersection. They crossed at grade originally. When they depressed the Lackawanna line in 1912, there was a bridge on the Orange Branch over the Lackawanna. There's no bridge left there today, but the Lackawanna line is still here. So we're going back to Bloomfield Avenue again. So this is looking at again. We have a trolley in the photograph. The intersection being photographed for the trolley. You can still see one of the arms from one of the signals, and this is the uh, Bakelite factory. You can see their water tower here. There's a close-up that shows the wording Bakelite on it. And today this is there's nothing, but that's where the Bakelite factory was. That's vacant now. And then this is the piece of property that New Jersey Transit owns. Another shot of the same intersection at Bloomfield Avenue with trolleys. This was around 1952. And another shot from a slightly different angle showing the crossing where the trolleys and uh, cars cross the Orange Branch. Now the section, so this is Bloomfield Avenue here. The blue line is Lackawanna, orange line is the Orange Branch. So this whole section up here on the other side of Bloomfield Avenue, heading towards West Orange, was mostly farmland in 1906. There was a dairy farm up here called Knoll's Dairy Farm, and there was a new street down here called Brookside that was starting to expand housing out in this area. But most of this was um, farmland, which was really ideal for locating factories. This is the crossing at Bloomfield Avenue more recently. This is a Bill McKelvey photograph. So these properties here were ended up being owned by Hart's Mountain, and Hart's Mountain continued to use the freight line into up until they closed in 2000. Sometime they closed in 2011. So they were still using the freight line almost until they closed. So the view's looking up Bloomfield Avenue towards Bloomfield Center. So one of the landmarks in this area is what was originally the White Circle System Diner. When I mentioned before that New Jersey Transit commissioned these historic resource surveys, they would so this building is an example. So they looked at this building, looked at its architectural features, what was maintained, what remained, And they could say, the consultants who did the report would say, we think this building should be preserved as a historic building. And then they would give that to the State Historic Preservation Office. The State Historic Preservation Office would review that, and they would come up with if this, they would either give this building an opinion of eligibility or they would not if they didn't think it was historically significant. So this diner has an opinion of eligibility from 1995 from the State Office of Historic Preservation. It was built in 1954 by the Mano Dining Car Company, which was located in Belleville. Bloomfield also had a diner company, which was on Arlington Avenue, um, but this one was built by Mano, and today it's La Taqueria Los Guerreros. They maintained all the significant features and didn't destroy any of the original signage. Somewhere in this location, there's a Jersey City 10-mile marker. I took this photograph several years ago. I was looking for the marker recently and couldn't find it, but it's somewhere around this location. So this is the aerial view of this area. So here we are on Bloomfield Avenue. This whole area here is what used to be farmland. Um, in the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, most of this was this part of the property was Lennon Fink, the manufacturers of Lysol, and the section over towards Bloomfield Avenue was Tungsol. This was originally a book factory. American Book was located here, but and then eventually Tungsol moved in. So yeah, Lennon Fink employed about 450 people in Bloomfield, and they closed in 1963. So Lysol, Lennon Fink, their water tower looked like a Lysol bottle. This is their water tower close up, and this is what the Lysol bottle looked like at the time. So this is an example of, so this was Lennon Fink when, when they had their railroad siding, and this is one of the places where they'd load freight. And then this was eventually bought by Hart's Mountain, and they continued to use the freight line. This is another Bill McKelvey photo from, you can see the Hart's sign back here. This is the inner part of this Lennon Fink property, which became Hart's Mountain. So Hart's Mountain opened in 1960. They employed 180 people on 14 acres, and they closed in 2011. So this is a view of the Lennon Fink property, uh, and which later became Hart's Mountain. Today, this is apartment buildings, and this is where there's a shopping center strip mall with Aldi and some other little stores. So this photograph down here is, I'm going to show this video. Uh, So this is something somebody posted on Facebook. That building, which was Delco Remy, originally Lennon Fink, this is it being prepared for building the apartments. Let me do this one more time with sound. Okay, so this is what's there today, this apartment complex. Now, one of the first industries in this area was American LaFrance. This is a 1938 map. At the time, this was International Projection Company. But I wanted to show this map because it shows the siding going off of the Orange Branch. So Orange Branch here. This is the siding. So we have a whole collection of photographs of the building of American LaFrance. American LaFrance made fire trucks and firefighting apparatus, and they built this building here in around 1920. They weren't there very long either. They moved out after a while. So this is one of the photographs of the building. The company that was building it, the foundation company, commissioned a photographer to take these photographs, documenting the building of the whole factory. So the line back here, the orange line back here is the Orange Branch. This is the siding that was off of the Orange Branch that was built specifically for American LaFrance. In one of the other photographs, you can see in the distance, so the Orange Branch is back here in the distance, and you can see the General Electric building over here, and the Westinghouse building over here on the right. So this is these we've got a whole collection of these photographs on the Historical Society website of the building of the factory. And they had their name, LaFrance, on their smokestack, and this is their powerhouse. The water tower and the smokestack are no longer there, but the powerhouse is still there, but the windows are boarded up. So the powerhouse is still there, and the factory buildings are still there. So um, after American Arms and Fuse, Delco Remy used this building. This is their display at the on the upper right-hand corner. Their display at the industrial exhibition. They were making batteries for cars. And then they were making 4,000 batteries a day. In 1942, GM formed this Eastern Aircraft Division. They started using this factory for manufacturing aircraft parts for World War II. So when this whole area was farmland, a couple of the earliest factories that moved into this area were Sprague Electric and Wiggins um, woven wall coverings. So this is the Orange Branch and this is the Lackawanna. So all of these industries at this intersection had sidings on both railroads. And then this building was at the time was a company called Sawyer Mann Electric Company, but that grew into um, Westinghouse. Sprague turned into General Electric. There's a street here that a lot of the Westinghouse buildings were on, which at the time was called Clearfield Avenue, and that's what was renamed MacArthur Avenue. So that's MacArthur Avenue today, and parallel to Watsessing. So the Wiggins company made wall coverings, but manufactured under the name Fabricona. They had a couple other names too, but that was one of the earliest industries in this area on the railroad lines. And this is the Westinghouse, what became the whole Westinghouse campus. Quite a few buildings. They were celebrating. This photograph is from a book celebrating the 125th anniversary of the founding of Bloomfield. And they were saying in this article 30 years ago, which would have been 1907, that's when Westinghouse built their first plant. And today they've got 12 buildings covering 13 acres and employing 2,600 people. So this is the Orange Branch over here on the right. This is Arlington Avenue here that cuts through the buildings. They had a bridge between a couple of the buildings there that you'll see in another picture. And this was their exhibit at the industry exhibition. This is another photograph of their factories at an earlier stage. It was a popular for postcards. They were frequently on postcards. So a lot of the information I got was from employee magazines. So there was an employee magazine called Human Engineering, Commercial Engineering News in 1919 had an article about Westinghouse. And Westinghouse was talking about how people are concerned with engineering, meaning machinery and equipment, but what about the human engineer? So they wanted to treat their employees well and recognize that they were valuable. So they had they had a cafeteria, they had a dance floor, and if you didn't want to dance, you could go to the women's recreation room or the men's recreation room. Another photo of some of the Westinghouse buildings at a later time, another postcard photograph. And this is the bridge I mentioned before. So this is Arlington Avenue, and they had a bridge connecting a couple buildings. These are freight cars stopped right here. So this was one of their sidings, and it has a couple freight cars on it at the time. So this is Arlington Avenue looking towards Watsessing up here in the distance. Another shot of their building, one of these older factory buildings that had a modern facade. This is on what was at Washington Plaza, Westinghouse Plaza. There's a little parking area there. Westinghouse was also known for its strikes. There was one in 1946. So these pictures of the strikes appear frequently on eBay for sale. So this is one of those photographs of the strike in 1946. So Westinghouse was known for the participating in the Manhattan Project. So in 1942, they diverted their lamp division labs to the production of uranium. They were making up to a ton of uranium every month from 1941 to 43. And then the US government took over the uranium production in 1943. And then these buildings were all demolished, and there was controversy about whether the property was actually cleaned up properly. But there was a headline in a newspaper article from around 1986 that said, expert deny it's a cancer risk. They claimed that they had spent $20 million to clean up the site, and some of the buildings had low-level radiation from uranium. Um, but they claimed that it all had been remediated and the property was safe now. So this is what's there now. This is an apartment complex. There is one section of the property that was too contaminated to build housing on, which is a parking lot now. But most of this is where Westinghouse used to be. This photo is from the Arlington Avenue Bridge. So the Orange Branch went under this bridge. So these are the old Sprague Electric buildings. They started manufacturing motors for trolley cars and elevators. And then they grew into this 1 million square foot, 6-story building, which was the General Electric plant, was built in 1915. The old uh, Sprague buildings are over here on the left, and the train tracks that you see in the foreground is the Orange Branch running right through there. Today, this is Parkway Lofts. They kept the building and turned it into apartments. This was General Electric's exhibit at the Industrial Exhibition. This is an oil furnace, and they were experimenting with heat pumps, and they were producing air conditioners also. So this is showing the General Electric plant over here when we were looking at the Orange Branch in front of it. So there's a passenger car on the line at the time. So standing on the Arlington Avenue Bridge, looking towards Grove Street, Bloomfield Avenue, so you can see where the Orange Branch used to be. Um, this is still passable. You can walk through here. I've gone through here numerous times exploring. So one of the times I went through here exploring, I wanted to see the Arlington Avenue Bridge. I read that the State Historic Preservation Office had declared this bridge as historically significant, and I wanted to see why. I went over to check it out and discovered a couple people living under the bridge. So I did an article about this and was published in Weird, New Jersey. So if you want to read that article, it's on a link on my page, richrockwell.com. So there are a couple people in there. You can't really see them from this picture, but there's a guy here and there's a woman over here. So they had a lot of stuff around here too. And on the way there were popular building walls that were where graffiti artists practiced their talent. This is one of my favorites. And then there was another one. This also included these in the article in Weird New Jersey, and a colleague of mine knew what these said. This says something. It's described in the article. I forget what it is. It's somebody's name. So this where the apartment buildings are now. You can see the Parkway lofts across the. This is the Lackawanna Railroad. So you can see Parkway lofts across the railroad on the other side of the railroad. And this is where the Orange Branch was. The developer of this apartment complex purchased this section of the Orange Branch and built their parking lot on it. And this is going across the Lackawanna line, which is here in blue, to the other side where General Electric was. This is where the Parkway lofts, and this is where the Orange Branch went. They bought their property too. The Orange Branch property, and it's now parking lot. And continuing to the west towards West Orange. This is what's there today. So the picture on the right was taken in 1970. There's a Parkway Bridge over where the railroad went. So this is heading off to West Orange. And today that's the dog park of the apartment Parkway lofts. And you can see the Parkway Bridge in the distance. So that wraps it up. I'm really grateful to the people who worked on this railroad line. All my knowledge came from studying maps and photographs. I envy all the people who actually experienced the Orange Branch and documented it. Bill McKelvey, Jim Costabosa, and Kevin Olson, who did the program last month. And Liberty Historic Railway website was a really good source for a lot of the information that I got from this too. They've got tons of useful historic information, especially about the history of the railroad and the industries. So, if anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to address any questions. I don't know if people were putting comments in chat.
I see one question in the chat, and if anyone else would like me to ask a question for them, please feel free. Carol Salmon asks, were all mid-century telephones made from Bakelite?
Well, I don't know if I could. I mean, I don't know whether I could say all of them were made. Most of them were, but there were other plastics and other companies that were experimenting with plastics around the time. So some of them were probably made from other materials, but many of them were made from Bakelite.
Bill wants to know if this Zoom meeting will be recorded. Yes, it will be recorded. And if you sign up for our newsletter, we will send out a link to that recording.
Yep.
Rich, do you know who owns the Orange Branch corridor under the Arlington Avenue Bridge?
Well, the actual I believe I'm not sure of the exact position, but I think that the property line is right under the bridge. So towards Bloomfield is still owned by Norfolk Southern, and the section to the west from the Arlington Avenue Bridge up to the Lackawanna and even beyond, because I showed you the building across the Lackawanna. Those were bought by two developers. The developer on one side is where Westinghouse used to be, and the developer on the opposite side is where General Electric was. So those developers bought that property. as far as I know. I mean, I don't think they could build on it if they didn't buy it. And I do know, I was on the planning board when the property at the Arlington Avenue Bridge was what do you call it when they split it off to sell it and improve that process.
If there's anyone else that wants to ask a question, just remember to unmute yourself. Well, he says, Rich Rockwell is Bloomfield's greatest historian. We're lucky to have him.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. It's
Okay,
it's just amazing to see the industrial history here brought alive. And yes, we will be posting this to our website and we will send the link out to our newsletter.
so long.
Take care.